Evening settled over Houston's River Oaks district, the city's lights glittering like a scattering of stars on dark water. Simone Harper parked her sleek black SUV at the valet, adjusting Zoe in her arms, the baby cooing softly in her pink dress. Tonight was supposed to be a quiet tribute, a dinner to honor memories, to remember Daniel, her late husband, who had proposed here 5 years ago. She checked the reservation on her phone. Label Eto, 7:30 p.m., table for two, one adult, one infant. Everything seemed in place, yet a weight hung in the air she couldn't explain. Inside, the crystal windows reflected the golden glow of chandeliers, classical music weaving between conversations. Madison Pierce, the hostess, surveyed the room from her podium, heels clicking on marble as she calculated power and influence in every glance. Wealthy diners lingered over menus that didn't display prices, each dish a silent gatekeeping measure. Simone's confident, measured steps toward the podium caught Madison's attention immediately. "Can I help you?" Madison asked, voice sharp, eyes narrowing, scanning Simone like an intruder. "I have a reservation for 7:30, Dr. Simone Harper," Simone replied, holding Zoe against her chest, calm but firm. Madison's eyes barely flicked to the confirmation. "We don't have any reservation under that name," she said with feigned authority, dismissive. Simone pulled up her phone. "Here's my confirmation email," she said, her fingers swiping methodically, a surgical precision carried over from her hospital routines. Madison glanced, waved it off. "That must be a mistake. We're completely booked. Perhaps the diner down the street would be more comfortable." Her smile was cold, cruel. Heat rose in Simone's chest, but she maintained control. "I would like to speak with your manager, please." Madison's laughter echoed, targeting her with contempt. Derek Carter appeared, his face a mask of discomfort and silent complicity. "Is everything all right here, Madison?" he asked, avoiding eye contact with Simone. She presented her confirmation again, explaining the deposit and reservation. Derek hesitated, but Madison interrupted, dismissing him. As Simone reached for the podium's reservation book, Madison's hand shot out. The slap cracked through the restaurant. Zoe screamed, tension rippling through the room. Diners whispered, some filming discreetly. Madison's threats came thick and fast, warnings about trespassing and potential arrest. Simone adjusted Zoe, steadying herself amidst the chaos. More voices rose, the elderly couple nearby, diners with phones recording. A young lawyer declaring the illegality of Madison's actions. The restaurant's complicity, Derek's silence, Madison's privilege and cruelty. The tension was palpable. Madison dialed the police, spinning a false narrative, fear in her voice, crafting a dangerous story to escalate the situation. Simone's hands trembled but stayed steady, whispering comfort to Zoe. The police arrived. Officer Jennings, rigid, threatening, and Officer Martinez, hesitant but observant. Orders were given, rights ignored, and Simone's composure met oppression head-on. She held Zoe protectively, asserting her right to make a phone call, a lifeline to authority. Jonathan Wright, CEO of Elysian Dining Collective, was summoned. His voice reverberated through the crowd, restoring truth, exposing lies, and demanding accountability. Witnesses, staff, and diners formed a chorus against injustice. Madison faltered, Derek's guilt surfaced. Security removed the perpetrators, and Simone, holding Zoe, reclaimed dignity amidst scattered baby supplies and shattered control. Applause, relief, and the power of collective witnessing created a moment of justice. The city lights outside glimmered as a reminder. The world watches, and actions have consequences. Justice had begun, not for spectacle, but as a turning point in accountability and courage. The city lights reflected off the wet pavement as Simone and Zoe stepped outside, the sounds of traffic mingling with the murmurs of the growing crowd. The live streams multiplied on phones, each recording a version of the truth, capturing Madison's cruelty, Derek's silence, and the officer's intimidation. Jonathan Wright's authority shifted the atmosphere instantly, a single voice cutting through chaos, demanding recognition of harm done and accountability enforced. Simone inhaled the cool evening air. Zoe nestled against her, eyes wide but trusting. Reporters and bystanders asked questions, their cameras capturing her composure, her determination. Every word she spoke carried weight beyond personal vindication. It was a declaration that injustice could be documented and challenged. She explained clearly what had happened, emphasizing that this was about every mother, every person who had been excluded, humiliated, or threatened because of race, class, or status. Madison, now removed from the podium, stood with mascara streaked across her face, the hubris of privilege replaced by panic. Derek lingered, shame evident, realizing that his silence had enabled harm repeatedly. The crowd's energy shifted from shock to righteous indignation. The power of witness testimony crystallized. The valet Carlos stepped forward, recounting similar discrimination he had observed over the years, his voice steady. Kitchen staff added their accounts, the accumulated truth forming an undeniable record of systemic abuse. Officer Jennings remained, face red with frustration, trying to assert authority, while Martinez's quiet judgment made it clear someone was noticing every violation. Simone's calm, methodical explanation of her rights, her professional status, and the legitimacy of her presence disrupted the false narrative Madison had attempted to construct. The CEO's intervention amplified the pressure, and suddenly the balance of power shifted irreversibly. The employees and witnesses realized their recordings were no longer just documentation. They were instruments of justice. Simone's mind flashed through the events leading up to this moment. The careful packing of Zoe's bag, the quiet anticipation of an anniversary dinner, the shock of Madison's aggression, the absurdity of Derek's complicity, and now the overwhelming responsibility of representing truth for countless others. Each moment was a test of her composure and her capacity to maintain authority in the face of systemic bias and intimidation. As she spoke to the cameras, the live count of viewers skyrocketed. People around the city were watching now. Millions would soon witness the power of collective accountability. Words like racial discrimination, false accusation, and abuse of power floated through the air, reinforcing the reality that this was more than a personal encounter. It was a societal reckoning. Simone's voice remained firm, measured, projecting the emotional weight of injustice while signaling hope and the possibility of structural change. The crowd began to disperse slowly, some lingering to offer support, others recording and sharing the story to social media networks. The experience had illuminated both cruelty and courage, revealing the importance of documenting, speaking up, and refusing to remain silent. Zoe's gentle breathing against Simone's chest reminded her why she had persisted. Every action taken tonight rippled outward, a small but significant step toward reshaping the conversation around discrimination, privilege, immunity, and accountability. Simone finally released a breath she didn't realize she had been holding. Her phone still warm in her hand, the scattered contents of the diaper bag now carefully gathered, she reflected on the evening's lessons. Justice had not just been a concept, it had been enacted through courage, witness, and unyielding insistence on truth. Even in the face of systemic power and intimidation, one mother, holding her child, had shifted the trajectory of accountability in her city. By the following morning, news of the incident had spread across Houston and beyond. Social media feeds were flooded with videos of Madison Pierce's assault, the slap, the false police call, and the chaos outside Label Eto. Simone, back in her office at Metropolitan General Hospital, watched notifications surge. Zoe played quietly nearby, unaware of the viral storm unfolding around them. Simone's colleagues reached out with support, the administration confirming full backing for any legal action she wished to pursue. Simone's attorney coordinated rapidly, filing charges against Madison Pierce for assault, filing a false police report, and civil rights violations. Officer Jennings faced complaints for illegal search, abuse of authority, and threats to Zoe's safety. Derek Carter, the manager who had observed and enabled Madison's repeated misconduct, was also included for complicity. The evidence was compelling. 7 different camera angles, dozens of witness statements, and a live audience of hundreds outside the restaurant. For the first time, institutional authority would be held accountable through visible, undeniable proof. As the case proceeded, local news outlets covered it extensively. Morning shows interviewed Simone, highlighting not only her personal courage, but the systemic issues of racial discrimination in public accommodations and abuse of power in law enforcement. She spoke with clarity and composure, making it clear that this wasn't only about her experience, but about standing for those without cameras, without witnesses, without privilege. Within days, petitions and social media campaigns demanded immediate action. The Elysian Dining Collective announced an internal investigation, suspended Madison and Derrick, and promised reforms across all 127 locations. The story became a national conversation, sparking debates on accountability, systemic racism, and the importance of citizen witnesses in public spaces. Despite the attention, Simone remained grounded, focusing on Zoe and her work at the hospital. Every moment outside her office reminded her that personal bravery had ripple effects. Employees who had felt powerless witnessed justice. Officers who had acted unethically faced scrutiny, and the public had been forced to confront uncomfortable truths. The viral video was not just documentation, but an agent of accountability, exposing patterns of discrimination and inspiring civic action. Simone reflected on the sequence of events: the careful preparation for an anniversary dinner, Madison's calculated cruelty, Derrick's silence, and the officer's abuse of authority. Each choice mattered. Each failure to act had consequences. The public exposure had created a feedback loop of responsibility, ensuring that those in positions of power could no longer ignore misconduct without repercussions. In the midst of national attention, Simone continued her daily routine. Hospital corridors bustled around her as she balanced surgical responsibilities with overseeing the ongoing legal and advocacy actions sparked by that night. Zoe learned to navigate the office environment gently, Simone modeling resilience, accountability, and dignity. This balance, professional excellence and moral vigilance, illustrated the ongoing work required to shift cultural expectations and enforce systemic change. The experience also reinforced the importance of community and witness action. Citizens, employees, and colleagues who had recorded, spoken up, and refused to look away played essential roles in holding institutions accountable. Simone recognized that justice was not achieved in isolation, but through a network of courage and responsibility. This understanding became a guiding principle in her ongoing advocacy work, extending beyond the immediate legal battles to influence policy and awareness nationwide. Weeks passed, and the legal processes moved swiftly. Madison Pierce's trial drew significant media attention. Each video clip, each witness testimony reinforced the pattern of discrimination and abuse of authority. The jury saw not only the assault and false accusations, but the systemic behavior enabled by silence, privilege, and complicity. Derrick Carter's failure to intervene, Officer Jennings's threats, and Madison's repeated discriminatory behavior were undeniable, forming a clear narrative of accountability. Simone attended each proceeding with Zoe in tow, her calm presence a striking contrast to the chaos these individuals had created. The courtroom was filled with journalists, colleagues, and ordinary citizens who had followed the story. Each detail Simone shared highlighted the real costs of inaction and systemic bias. The emotional toll, the threat to personal safety, and the broader societal consequences. During testimony, Carlos the valet recounted multiple instances of Madison's discriminatory actions, revealing how often individuals were denied access based on race or socioeconomic status. Kitchen staff, long silent, came forward to describe the toxic environment Madison had perpetuated. Derrick Carter's repeated inaction underscored the role of complicity in sustaining harmful practices. The jury absorbed the breadth of these accounts, connecting each moment of cruelty and silence to the broader institutional responsibility. Officer Jennings's behavior was particularly scrutinized. Audio recordings, video evidence, and testimony from Officer Martinez revealed a pattern of racial profiling and abuse of power, directly challenging claims of procedural justification. Expert witnesses on constitutional rights and law enforcement standards confirmed that Jennings's actions violated multiple legal and ethical boundaries, particularly in his threats toward Zoe. The evidence painted a clear portrait. These were not isolated mistakes, but choices with real harmful impact. The prosecution emphasized the cascading consequences of such misconduct: psychological trauma, erosion of trust in institutions, and the chilling effect on citizens exercising their rights. Simone's composure and professionalism contrasted sharply with the arrogance and aggression of those being held accountable. Every word, every gesture, every recorded action had been preserved, leaving no room for doubt. In the end, the jury delivered verdicts that reverberated beyond the courtroom. Madison Pierce was convicted on all counts: assault, filing a false police report, and civil rights violations. Officer Jennings faced convictions for illegal search and seizure, abuse of authority, and threats against a minor. Derek Carter was held responsible for complicity and failure to act. Sentencing reflected the severity of the actions and the message that abuse of power, discrimination, and complicity have consequences. Simone's victory was not only legal, but symbolic. She had transformed personal trauma into a moment of accountability, demonstrating the power of courage, evidence, and collective witness. Outside the courthouse, supporters and citizens shared their gratitude, emphasizing that standing up against injustice could create change. Social media campaigns continued to highlight systemic reform, promoting discussions about racial justice, ethical responsibility, and the critical role of civic engagement. Back in her office, Simone reflected quietly. Zoe played nearby, unaware of the wider implications of her mother's actions. Simone considered the ripple effect of the events: policy changes at Elysian Dining Collective, law enforcement reforms, and the awakening of public awareness. Her determination to protect dignity and enforce accountability had catalyzed tangible change, proving that one person's resolve, combined with the courage of witnesses, could disrupt entrenched systems of harm. Over the following months, Simone Harper channeled the momentum from the courtroom victories into meaningful reforms. At Elysian Dining Collective, she joined the corporate advisory board with authority to enforce equity initiatives. Mandatory anti-bias training was implemented across all 127 locations, anonymous reporting systems were established, and diverse leadership recruitment began, transforming a once toxic corporate culture. Employees who had previously been silenced found a voice, and a network of accountability was created where before there had been silence. The police department also began reforms. Officer Martinez, recognized for his honesty and willingness to confront Jennings, was promoted and tasked with developing bias recognition training. Complaints of racial profiling dropped by 40%, indicating that procedural and cultural changes were taking hold. Jennings' termination and legal consequences sent a clear signal: abuse of authority and racial discrimination would no longer be tolerated. Simone used her platform to advocate for systemic change. Interviews, social media campaigns, and public speaking engagements emphasized the importance of citizen witnessing and standing against discrimination. Her message resonated nationally. Documentation, speaking up, and refusing to remain silent could dismantle patterns of injustice. Through these actions, the incident at Label Eto became a catalyst for wider social awareness. Simone also prioritized mentorship, guiding younger medical professionals and advocating for equity within the hospital system. She encouraged colleagues to recognize the power of their positions and to use it responsibly, cultivating a culture of integrity. Her personal example, remaining composed, documenting abuses, and taking decisive action, served as a blueprint for others facing systemic bias. Throughout, Zoe grew, unaware of the viral storm that had surrounded her early life. Simone's maternal presence remained steadfast, balancing activism with nurturing care. Each step reinforced that accountability and compassion were not mutually exclusive but intertwined principles for creating meaningful change. The viral video, now viewed tens of millions of times, remained a reference point for discussions about discrimination in public spaces. Media outlets analyzed the implications, civic organizations mobilized, and legal frameworks were scrutinized for gaps. Simone's single act of courage had generated systemic reverberations, inspiring policy reforms, corporate accountability, and civic engagement. Simone reflected quietly on the power of witness and documentation. Madison Pierce, Officer Jennings, and Derek Carter had all faced consequences, yet Simone understood that the broader societal lesson lay in ongoing vigilance. Justice was not an endpoint, but a continuous effort to maintain equity and accountability. Her story illustrated how one individual, with the support of witnesses and integrity, could challenge entrenched systems and catalyze widespread change. As summer approached, Simone sat in her office, awards lining the walls, and Zoe playing nearby. Each day reflected a measure of progress, each action a reaffirmation that courage and persistence mattered. The events of that night at Label Eto had left a permanent imprint, demonstrating that accountability is possible when truth is amplified. Witnesses act and injustice is confronted with unwavering resolve. By fall, the effects of Simone Harper's actions were tangible across multiple sectors. At Elysian Dining Collective, reports of discrimination dropped, staff engagement improved, and the atmosphere shifted from one of fear and exclusion to one of accountability and inclusion. Simone continued to oversee anti-bias programs, ensuring that training was consistent and actionable, with clear consequences for misconduct. The police department's reforms also gained traction. Officer Martinez led bias recognition workshops, and citizen reporting systems were improved. Complaints of racial profiling became systematically addressed, with oversight boards ensuring transparency. The dismissal and legal consequences faced by Officer Jennings served as a precedent, reinforcing the importance of accountability for law enforcement officers and the necessity of checks on authority. Simone's public presence expanded. She gave interviews and spoke at panels about civil rights, racial justice, and the role of documentation and witnesses in enforcing accountability. She emphasized that her actions at Label Eto were about protecting the vulnerable, particularly mothers, children, and marginalized communities. Each engagement reinforced the importance of civic responsibility, courage, and the ripple effect one person can generate in society. Within her hospital, Simone became a mentor and advocate for systemic change. Colleagues sought her guidance on ethical dilemmas, equity in patient care, and organizational reform. She led initiatives that ensured diversity in leadership, fair treatment of staff, and the integration of equity principles into hospital policies. Her approach combined personal experience with institutional advocacy, reinforcing the connection between professional responsibility and social justice. Despite the intense public attention, Simone remained focused on her daughter. Zoe thrived, her early experiences marked by safety, love, and the knowledge that her mother would not allow injustice to prevail. Simone's ability to balance activism with parenting served as an example of resilience and intentionality, illustrating that moral courage and care for loved ones are mutually reinforcing. Simone's influence extended beyond corporate and legal reforms. Her advocacy inspired other public figures, organizations, and individuals to confront discrimination proactively. Stories circulated of individuals taking action in similar situations, emboldened by Simone's courage and the systemic changes that followed. A cultural shift was underway, emphasizing the responsibility of bystanders and the power of collective action. Through all this, Simone reflected on the long-term implications. The events of that evening had revealed vulnerabilities in societal systems, but also the potential for change when injustice is met with resolve. Her ongoing efforts illustrated that real change requires sustained attention, strategic action, and unwavering commitment to truth and equity. Each reform, each new policy, and each educational initiative became part of a larger legacy, ensuring that the lessons of Label Eto would continue to resonate and influence the culture of accountability in Houston and beyond. Winter arrived, and Houston's skyline glistened under a rare frost, the crisp air carrying both the scent of rain and a sense of renewal. Simone Harper continued her advocacy, balancing hospital responsibilities with public engagement. Each initiative she led reflected lessons from Label Eto, the need for vigilance, systemic reform, and the courage to confront injustice directly. Elysian Dining Collective's reforms were fully operational. Monthly anti-bias workshops, anonymous reporting channels, and leadership diversity audits ensured accountability was not theoretical, but enforced. Staff who once feared reprisal for reporting misconduct now felt empowered, creating a cultural shift that reinforced respect and fairness. Within the police department, procedural changes transformed everyday practice. Officer Martinez's leadership in bias recognition had created a cadre of officers committed to ethical standards. Citizens reported fewer incidents of profiling, and the department had begun tracking metrics to ensure that reforms were measurable and effective. The consequences faced by Officer Jennings had become a case study in accountability, demonstrating the cost of abuse of power. Simone's public advocacy expanded to national platforms. Interviews, panels, and webinars highlighted the structural issues revealed by her experience, emphasizing that personal courage combined with witness action could enforce accountability. She addressed parents, professionals, and community leaders, underlining the importance of documenting injustice, speaking up, and standing with those facing discrimination. At the hospital, Simone's mentorship programs flourished. Staff were encouraged to confront bias, advocate for equitable treatment, and participate in leadership opportunities. Her approach integrated professional excellence with moral responsibility, fostering a culture that valued both competence and conscience. Her influence extended beyond medical practice, shaping organizational norms in education, policy, and community engagement. Zoe grew resilient, navigating a world partially shaped by her mother's courage. Simone remained mindful of her daughter's experiences, balancing exposure to social justice with safety, nurturing and play. Their home became a space of learning, reflection, and empowerment, reinforcing that personal and societal change are intertwined. The ripple effects of Label Eto continued. Individuals across Houston and the nation began reporting, documenting, and confronting discriminatory practices in various public and private settings. Civic organizations amplified these efforts, using Simone's example to educate and mobilize communities. The story had evolved from a single incident into a broader movement for accountability, demonstrating the enduring impact of one individual's resolve coupled with collective action. Simone reflected on the ongoing work. Justice was not a singular event, but a continuous effort requiring vigilance, courage, and systemic enforcement. Her story illustrated that the path to meaningful change is rarely immediate, but accumulates through consistent action, witness participation, and unwavering commitment to ethical principles. The winter light, crisp and clear, symbolized both the challenges and the hope that emerged from her steadfast advocacy. As the new year approached, the changes Simone Harper had initiated began showing concrete results. Elysian Dining Collective reported measurable improvements in employee satisfaction, reduction in discriminatory incidents, and greater inclusivity in customer service practices. Monthly audits revealed fewer complaints, a more empowered staff, and a culture shifting toward accountability. Simone's presence on the advisory board ensured these policies were enforced, not just proposed, making discrimination a clear risk for those in positions of authority. In the police department, Officer Martinez's leadership in bias awareness had transformed internal practices. Officers underwent regular training, complaints were documented meticulously, and accountability structures prevented abuses similar to Officer Jennings's actions. Citizen confidence increased as transparency became standard practice. Jennings's termination and legal penalties served as a reminder that power comes with responsibility and misuse would have lasting consequences. Simone continued her public outreach, sharing her story at conferences and through online platforms. She emphasized that witnessing and documenting injustice could change the trajectory of systemic problems. Her talks resonated with parents, professionals, and activists, illustrating the ripple effect of courage, evidence, and community support. The incident at Label Eto had become a case study in civic action, empowering others to challenge inequities wherever they arose. Within the hospital, Simone's mentorship programs thrived. Junior doctors and staff were encouraged to raise concerns about inequity, advocate for ethical treatment, and take leadership roles. Simone's model of professional excellence, paired with moral responsibility, demonstrated that personal integrity could inspire institutional change. Her advocacy underscored the importance of combining courage with practical action, making ethical conduct a tangible part of organizational culture. Zoe continued to grow, her environment reflecting safety, empowerment, and nurturing. Simone balanced her professional responsibilities with parenting, demonstrating resilience and intentionality in every interaction. The lessons from Label Eto extended beyond legal and corporate reform. They shaped personal values and the next generation's understanding of justice, equity, and advocacy. The story of that night continued to reverberate. Citizens, colleagues, and community leaders were emboldened to speak up, record, and challenge discriminatory behavior in various contexts. Simone's courage and persistence demonstrated that even a single incident could catalyze widespread change when met with deliberate, principled action. Simone reflected on the journey from that evening to the present, recognizing the work was ongoing. Justice and accountability were not static, but required continuous engagement and vigilance. The cultural shift initiated by one mother's refusal to accept injustice symbolized the potential for systemic change through courage, witness participation, and unwavering commitment to truth and equity. As Houston entered the new year, the community around Simone was markedly different. More attentive, more accountable, and increasingly unwilling to tolerate discrimination. Spring brought renewal to Houston, and Simone Harper's work continued to influence both corporate and public sectors. Elysian Dining Collective maintained its reformed policies. Regular anti-bias training, anonymous reporting systems, and promotions for employees of color strengthened the organization's accountability framework. Staff morale improved, and discriminatory behavior became less tolerated, illustrating that systemic change required both policy and enforcement. Simone's advocacy extended to national forums, where she spoke on the role of documentation, citizen witnessing, and immediate accountability. Her narrative emphasized that one person's courage, when combined with collective support, could catalyze meaningful reform. Parents, professionals, and community members cited her story as inspiration to address inequities in their own spheres of influence. At the hospital, mentorship and ethical leadership programs flourished under Simone's guidance. Junior staff learned the importance of reporting misconduct, challenging systemic bias, and advocating for inclusive practices. Simone modeled professional excellence with moral integrity, creating a culture where equity was expected and enforced rather than optional. Zoe grew resilient and confident, her upbringing enriched by an environment that valued justice, accountability, and empathy. Simone balanced her professional and activist roles with careful attention to her daughter's safety and well-being, teaching by example that courage and care are not mutually exclusive. The impact of the Label Eto incident continued to ripple. Media coverage, citizen engagement, and institutional reforms ensured that the narrative became a benchmark for discussing systemic discrimination. The story reinforced that active witness participation, recording, reporting, and challenging inequities was essential for meaningful societal change. Simone reflected on the progress, recognizing that accountability was a continuous effort requiring persistence and vigilance. She understood that change was not a moment but a sustained commitment, each policy, each mentorship, and each act of speaking out reinforcing a culture of fairness. The community she influenced grew more attentive, engaged, and prepared to confront injustice when encountered. Her story highlighted the interplay between personal courage and systemic transformation, demonstrating that meaningful impact arises from action, witness, and accountability. The lessons of Label Eto became embedded in policy, practice, and public consciousness, ensuring that the events of that night resonated far beyond a single restaurant and transformed expectations of responsibility and justice in Houston and beyond. Summer approached, and Houston buzzed with renewed energy. Simone Harper's influence had solidified. Elysian Dining Collective reported continued improvements, with employees empowered to report discrimination and leadership accountable for enforcement. Policy changes were now ingrained in daily operations, and a culture of inclusion had begun to replace previous patterns of fear and bias. Simone's public engagements increased, her narrative serving as a blueprint for addressing systemic inequities. She spoke about the power of evidence, citizen witnessing, and the importance of acting decisively when confronting injustice. Her story reached audiences across the country, inspiring similar movements in corporate and civic spaces. At Metropolitan General Hospital, Simone's mentorship programs expanded. Junior staff learned to navigate ethical challenges, confront bias, and advocate for equity. Simone modeled integrity and professional excellence, demonstrating how one individual's actions could reshape institutional culture. Her guidance empowered staff to act responsibly, reinforcing accountability at multiple levels. Zoe continued to thrive, growing confident in a world informed by her mother's courage. Simone balanced activism and motherhood with precision, showing that dedication to justice could coexist with attentive parenting. Her family life and professional advocacy became intertwined, each reinforcing the other in purpose and impact. The ripple effects of the Label Eto incident continued to influence public awareness. Social media campaigns, community organizations, and institutional reforms ensured sustained engagement on issues of discrimination and abuse of power. Simone's actions illustrated that systemic change was possible when truth, courage, and collective action converged. Simone reflected on the journey from a single night of harassment and false accusations to widespread reform in corporate and civic institutions. The lessons were clear: standing up against injustice, documenting abuse, and mobilizing witnesses could create meaningful, lasting change. Accountability required persistence, courage, and structural enforcement. The community had become more vigilant, informed, and empowered. Employees, citizens, and leaders recognized that silence and complicity had consequences. Simone's unwavering dedication had transformed not only policies and procedures, but also cultural expectations around responsibility, fairness, and ethical conduct. Looking out over Houston's skyline, Simone recognized that justice was ongoing work. Every policy enforced, every individual empowered, and every story shared contributed to a larger legacy. A society more attentive to inequity and committed to accountability. The summer light reflected the enduring possibility of positive change, a testament to the power of courage and collective action. By early fall, Simone Harper had cemented her role as both a leader and an advocate. Elysian Dining Collective continued to monitor and enforce its anti-discrimination policies with monthly audits and ongoing training. Employees who had previously feared retaliation were now active participants in upholding a culture of respect and accountability. Simone's advisory role ensured that reforms were not superficial but ingrained in operational standards. Simone's national profile grew. She spoke at conferences and online forums about civil rights, systemic inequities, and the importance of citizen witnessing. Her emphasis on evidence collection and documentation resonated widely, inspiring professionals and parents alike to act decisively in the face of injustice. Her narrative demonstrated how individual courage, combined with community support, could catalyze meaningful change. At Metropolitan General Hospital, Simone expanded mentorship programs focusing on ethical leadership and equity in patient care. Staff were encouraged to report bias and advocate for fairness. Simone's example illustrated that professional excellence and moral responsibility were inseparable, creating a culture where accountability became expected, not optional. Zoe thrived, surrounded by safety, guidance, and lessons in resilience. Simone balanced advocacy, leadership, and motherhood with intentionality, showing how courage could coexist with nurturing care. Their home became a space of reflection and empowerment, reinforcing the principles of justice Simone had modeled publicly. The repercussions of the Label Eto incident remained evident. Citizens, community leaders, and institutions increasingly prioritized accountability, utilizing the precedent Simone had set. Corporate policies, law enforcement reforms, and public discourse evolved, demonstrating the far-reaching effects of one individual's determined response to discrimination. Simone reflected on the cumulative impact. Her actions transformed organizational practices, empowered bystanders, and influenced cultural norms. She recognized that sustained vigilance and active participation were essential for maintaining systemic change. Justice was not static, but required continuous commitment, evidence-based enforcement, and moral courage. The community around Simone had evolved, more alert, more engaged, and more willing to challenge injustice. Her story reinforced that ethical responsibility extended beyond personal gain or comfort, illustrating the societal value of accountability. By fall, the changes were measurable and meaningful, reflecting the power of perseverance, witness engagement, and principled action in reshaping institutional behavior. As winter returned, Simone Harper reflected on the lasting impact of the events at Label Eto. The restaurant chain's comprehensive reforms had taken hold, ensuring that employees were trained, policies were enforced, and discrimination was systematically addressed. Simone's advisory role ensured these reforms were consistent and effective, transforming the organizational culture from one of fear and bias to one of accountability and inclusion. In law enforcement, Officer Martinez's leadership continued to influence training and behavior, with bias recognition and procedural integrity integrated into daily operations. Citizens reported fewer incidents of profiling, and transparency increased confidence in the department's practices. The consequences faced by Officer Jennings remained a clear deterrent to misuse of authority. Simone expanded her public advocacy, addressing national audiences on civic engagement, the the power of documentation, and the importance of standing against injustice. Her story illustrated that a single individual's courage, combined with the actions of witnesses and the support of institutions, could catalyze systemic change. Parents, professionals, and community members drew lessons from her example, understanding the value of evidence, advocacy, and moral courage. Within the hospital, Simone's mentorship and ethical leadership programs continued to thrive. Staff learned to challenge inequities, advocate for fairness, and assume responsibility for creating inclusive environments. Simone's example underscored that professional excellence and moral integrity were inseparable, reinforcing accountability and ethical behavior throughout the organization. Zoe grew confident and resilient, nurtured in a safe and empowering environment. Simone's dual role as mother and advocate demonstrated the integration of personal and societal responsibility, showing that courage and care could coexist. Their home became a space of learning, reflection, and empowerment, further reinforcing the lessons of justice and accountability. The ripple effects of the Label Eto incident remained visible in corporate, legal, and civic contexts. Public discourse on systemic discrimination and accountability continued, inspiring reforms and awareness beyond Houston. Simone's actions had created a blueprint for responding to injustice, emphasizing the critical role of witnesses, documentation, and proactive engagement. Simone reflected on the ongoing nature of justice. Accountability and systemic change required sustained effort, vigilance, and moral courage. Her story demonstrated that one person's resolve, when coupled with collective support and structural enforcement, could transform institutions, influence cultural norms, and inspire generations to confront inequity with integrity and determination. Spring returned to Houston, bringing warmer days and renewed energy to the city. Simone Harper continued her dual roles as a physician and a civic advocate. At Elysian Dining Collective, ongoing audits and employee training programs ensured that anti-discrimination policies were deeply embedded. Simone's oversight reinforced accountability, creating a sustainable culture of equity. The police department's reforms, led by Officer Martinez, remained effective. Citizen reports were taken seriously, bias training was standardized, and incidents of profiling continued to decline. Officer Jennings's termination served as a lasting reminder of the consequences of abuse of authority. Simone's public advocacy expanded further. She addressed community organizations, civic forums, and national media outlets, emphasizing the importance of documenting injustice and acting decisively. Her story highlighted the ripple effect one individual could create when supported by witnesses, evidence, and institutional responsiveness. Within the hospital, mentorship programs flourished. Staff learned to navigate ethical dilemmas, advocate for fairness, and take leadership roles in fostering inclusion. Simone's model of professional excellence, paired with moral courage, inspired colleagues to prioritize both performance and integrity. Zoe thrived in a safe, nurturing environment. Simone balanced her activism with parenting, demonstrating that courage and care can coexist. Their home became a space of empowerment and learning, reinforcing values of justice and responsibility. The wider community continued to benefit from the ripple effects of the Label Eto incident. Corporate, legal, and civic practices evolved, emphasizing accountability, transparency, and ethical behavior. Simone's actions became a blueprint for challenging systemic inequities, showing that vigilance and proactive engagement are essential. Simone reflected on the sustained changes, organizations more accountable, citizens more aware, and cultural norms shifting toward fairness and equity. The events at Label Eto had become a catalyst for broader systemic transformation, illustrating the enduring impact of individual courage combined with collective action. By summer, Simone Harper's advocacy had become a model for systemic reform. At Elysian Dining Collective, policies were fully integrated, ensuring fair treatment, anti-bias enforcement, and leadership accountability. Staff reported fewer incidents of discrimination, and employees felt empowered to act responsibly without fear of reprisal. The police department continued to enforce bias training and procedural integrity. Officer Martinez's leadership ensured complaints were addressed transparently, and public confidence increased. Officer Jennings' removal remained a case study in accountability, demonstrating the long-term consequences of abusing authority. Simone's public engagements continued to inspire. She emphasized the importance of documenting injustice, acting decisively, and mobilizing witnesses. Her story illustrated how one person's courage, combined with support from others and institutional accountability, could catalyze meaningful social change. Within the hospital, mentorship and leadership programs expanded. Staff were encouraged to confront inequities, advocate for inclusion, and uphold ethical standards. Simone's example reinforced the connection between professional responsibility and moral courage, creating a culture where integrity and accountability were expected. Zoe thrived, nurtured in an environment emphasizing justice, care, and resilience. Simone balanced advocacy with parenting, demonstrating that courage and nurturing care could coexist. Their home became a center of learning and reflection, further reinforcing the lessons of Label Eto. The ripple effects of that night continued to influence public, corporate, and institutional behavior. Citizens and organizations were emboldened to speak up and document injustices. Simone's actions provided a blueprint for systemic change, demonstrating the power of evidence, witness action, and moral courage. Reflecting on the journey, Simone recognized that justice was an ongoing process. Sustained vigilance, institutional reform, and ethical leadership were necessary to maintain accountability. The events at Label Eto had initiated far-reaching change, proving that one determined individual could alter cultural norms and inspire collective action toward equity and justice. The morning sun filtered through the windows of Simone Harper's office at Metropolitan General Hospital, glinting off awards that now included recognition for civic leadership and advancing racial justice. Zoe played quietly on the floor, blocks scattered around her, unaware of the viral storm that had reshaped lives and institutions. Simone held her daughter close, reflecting on the events that had unfolded 6 months earlier at Label Eto. The restaurant incident had sparked not only personal accountability, but systemic reforms in corporate policies and law enforcement practices. Simone pressed record on her phone, addressing an audience far beyond Houston. Her voice was calm, deliberate, and imbued with authority. She explained that her actions had been about more than a reservation. It had been about ensuring dignity, fairness, and justice for all who lacked voice or platform. She emphasized that standing up, documenting injustice, and mobilizing witnesses were critical steps in holding power accountable. The reforms she had helped implement at Elysian Dining Collective were now fully operational, with anti-bias training, diverse leadership recruitment, and anonymous reporting mechanisms embedded across all 127 locations. Law enforcement reforms had decreased complaints of profiling, with oversight and accountability mechanisms in place. Officer Martinez had been promoted to lead bias recognition training, while Officer Jennings faced the full consequences of his misconduct. Derek Carter, once complicit, had faced civil consequences and now engaged in educational programs, acknowledging the harm caused by his inaction. Simone's public advocacy continued to amplify awareness. Interviews, webinars, and speaking engagements emphasized that systemic change required courage, witness action, and institutional commitment. Her narrative inspired parents, professionals, and citizens to confront injustice in their own spheres. Her story underscored that legal victories, policy reforms, and cultural shifts were all interdependent outcomes of courageous action. She looked down at Zoe, the child who had been at the center of that night's turmoil. Simone reflected on the broader implications, how every witness, every recorded video, and every act of accountability contributed to a more just society. Her own resilience, paired with collective support, had catalyzed tangible change, proving that one person's courage can ripple outward and influence both policy and culture. Simone concluded the recording, addressing viewers directly. Be that someone. Record, speak up, stand with someone who needs your voice, or look away because it's easier. Justice is possible when we demand it. Take action, share this so others know they're not alone. Subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, and share this video. She ended the recording, holding Zoe close as they walked into sunlight. Both were unbroken, resilient, and a testament to the enduring power of courage, witness, and accountability. The fight for justice remained, but hope had been secured, and the work of transformation continued, fiercely protected and widely observed.